Greetings. It is time for another episode of Conversations about Meditation. And today I'm excited to introduce you to Jamie Reygle. He is the executive director of InStill Mindfulness. Jamie, welcome to the conversation. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. I'm well. It's a nice warm day up here in Floyd, Virginia. And I've been out in the garden this morning and getting ready to go and teach our final class of a pilot program we've been doing with law enforcement officers. So it's a good day.
Oh, wonderful. So that's a great segue. Tell us about that program. That sounds fascinating. And then we'll come back to how you got into this because I want to hear about that. Tell us about the program. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Well, there's a local police captain who's attended our retreats in the past. And we got in touch with him and said, look, we'd be interested in introducing mindfulness to law enforcement. He was like, me too.
Nice.
And we've done, we're just completing an 8-week program now. It's a pilot. And it's some of the most rewarding work I've ever done. It's like, there's so much trauma, Barbara. There's so much they're taking on a daily basis. It's and their willingness, the ones that have stuck with it, their willingness to go in and investigate and see what's there when there's some really painful stuff, is, you know, it's so courageous, and just to be there with them for that, and to be part of that process, and to see the realizations and the insights that develop. It's so powerful. I could do that work for the rest of my life, I think.
Oh, that is exciting. And it's great to hear that places are open to that, because I remember probably 20 years ago when I was really kind of starting my path, I always thought, what a great place to go. You know, I was trying to, slip into some local law enforcement, even just to have basic stress management tools, and just never happened. So it's great to see that I can say that I know someone who's involved with using mindfulness, because I think the thing that sometimes meditation and mindfulness doesn't get the press around, to me, the importance of how more self-aware you become. I think we hear about the blood pressure and all that, but just a level of self-awareness I think you get from doing the mindfulness and meditation practices is just incredible.
Yeah, and in essence, I think that's kind of what leads to a lot of the lowered blood pressure and all the other symptoms you see. It's more when we start to relate with ourselves differently, our body follows. And
Yes.
I think that there's something really rich in that. And when you're working with a group that's experienced so much trauma, you feel it on a really deep level. It's so clear. Like, it's just all this weight falling off their shoulders. It's just,
yes, because think about all of the the stereotypical stuff we hear about what police officers do and how they are, and they don't have feelings, just all of these things, and then likely many men, and so you've got all of these preconceived ideas about what someone is supposed to, how someone's supposed to respond. But I can't imagine, it's like carrying a 100-pound weight every day, and then you've got to drop it at some point in time. So that is great news to hear. So I'm glad to hear about that program, and I hope it gets rolled out in other places, because that, I think, is where we're going to see some major results, when things like that can get pushed out beyond just a pilot program to be something just like any other education that we put out there. So that is great. Congratulations.
well, thank you. And I think it will. Like, the time is right. What we noticed is, like, the police department itself was just like, yes, we want to do that. There's a real there's a sense of urgency about it in policing right now, that they know they need to do something. They know that some things need to be addressed.
Exactly.
And this goes right there.
Wonderful. So how did you start meditating? Tell us about how that happened for you. And then I want to know, not only did you start meditating, you have an organization called InStill Mindfulness, which means that you took that to a whole different level, because many people meditate, but you have an actual program and that offers retreats. So tell us about how you got there.
Well, in the mid-90s, my mother signed me up for a program called In Search of the Self, and it was from Siddha Yoga. Guru Mai, I think, is their guru at the moment, and that's who my mum was really into at the time. I think she still is. And I would receive, I think, once a month, this kind of, it's not really a newsletter, it was just some writing from the Siddha Yoga Foundation that really took you into investigating who you were. And that gave you some meditations to work with. It was mainly just chanting, mainly just mantra. So I think Om Namah Shivaya is their big one, but there was also probably Om Mani Padme Hum and all that sort of stuff, you know. So that was my introduction to meditation, mid-90s. And then a few years later, I had a major life change. I just basically dropped everything, my relationship, my work, where I was living, and moved out of the country and moved on to a community that turned out to be it was a Buddhist community. It was called Dhammananda in Australia. And there were a couple of teachers there that taught mindfulness practices. And I attended my first mindfulness retreat there. They had a meditation hall there. Well, they had a couple. And so I would meditate with a few other members of the community there every morning. And that's where I got introduced to mindfulness practice, the basics of mindfulness practice. And then it's evolved from there. I did A Course in Miracles a few times, and that's another form of meditation, I think. And I would sort of incorporate mindfulness practice into the Course in Miracles meditations. And I also did the work of Byron Katie, which is another kind of, it's another meditation. To do the work properly, you've really got to sit with it and meditate with it. So it was those four things, I guess, that really led me into my understanding of meditation practice as I do it now. They're probably the main four factors.
And what took you from, okay, I've learned, because I'm familiar with all the ones you mentioned, because in fact, this morning in meditation, I used the 4 questions of A Course in Miracles. Where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to whom? And I love that because it is a great inquiry to go, let me be real mindful about where I'm about to put my energy, right? So what takes you from A Course in Miracles, the work with Byron Katie, meditating, you were in Australia, and there's a lot of good work out of Australia where people are doing this work. What takes you from there to say, oh, I want to open up my own center? Because you have a major center with programs, that people are involved in. So how do you go from that to, let me open up a center? What was the impetus for that?
Okay, so quickly, we're not technically a center. I'm in my office now. This is the only space we have any occupancy of. So we're not technically a center. We tend to do outreach. We go to where it's needed. So how did that happen? Well, okay, so I moved here to Floyd in 2005, and in I think 2008, well, 2007, a neighbor of ours co-founded an organization called iBme, Inward Bound Mindfulness Education, and they did retreats for teenagers, and they still do. They now do it across America and even overseas. So he co-founded that, and he knew that I was into meditation practice and asked me to staff his retreats. And so I began staffing those iBme retreats, I think in 2008. And I think I staffed about a dozen of them all up. And towards the end of that, so around, I don't know, 2012, 2014, around that time, he had handed over the control of the organization to other people, but he still had an office here in town where he was still trying on stuff and he had some funding to do all that, but he was very busy and needed some help. So he got me into being an administrative assistant. And I helped teach some, especially in the local schools and stuff like that, because he was doing some stuff in the local schools. And then that disbanded, and so all the work we were doing also disbanded because there was limited funding, and IBME is still going, but the the local office was, the Floyd office
Mhm.
wasn't. And then I bumped into one of the student counselors here in town, and in a coffee shop, and she just said, "Hey, you should come back and teach." It's like, oh, okay. And so I went back and taught, and I had a friend of mine was able to help fund me to do that. And then I started teaching in some other schools, and I just came to the realization, it's like, this is what I want to do.
Mm.
This is where I find the most joy, and the most enjoyment, and the most fulfillment. And
Yeah.
I've always been a person who didn't know what they wanted to do. So just that revelation that this is
You're not alone.
so yeah, so that's how that was the beginning of InStill Mindfulness. That realization was the beginning of
Yeah.
InStill Mindfulness.
And I love that. I met a guy named Kristen De La Huerta, and he uses the terminology divine choreography. I love the divine choreography of how, you ran into someone in a coffee shop, and, and it just went from there. But all the things that had happened before prepared you for that particular moment. And I think that is the beauty of when we take that journey back down someplace and reflect on it, how things just come together for us.
Are
So,
you familiar with this? Are you familiar with the surrender experiment?
I don't think I'm familiar with that. Tell me.
Michael Singer, the author of The Untethered Soul,
Yeah.
has a memoir called The Surrender Experiment, and it's exactly what that's about. It's just like saying yes to whatever presents itself to him, and he's had a lifetime of doing that, well, since his very early 20s, and it's a fascinating story.
I'll
So
have to check that out. Yeah, it sounds, because surrender is a big word. It's, I went through this period where I had words for the year, and it was like, I think for 10 years, surrender was my words, like the main surrender, surrender, let go, surrender, surrender. And getting better, it's a practice. I think so much of what we do in life is a practice. So surrendering is a practice, learning to listen and listen for that guidance. And I'm learning now that it's like, well, what good is guidance if you don't take it when you receive it? It's like, you asked me for guidance, I gave you guidance, but you didn't do what you asked me about. That makes sense.
yeah. And I
Oh,
really think it's the essence of mindfulness practice. It is surrender, or allowing. I like to use the word allowing. But there's, like, when you start doing it on the level of at the level of sensation, where you just allow what presents itself, and the level of thought, a thought arises, just allow it to be there. When you start getting into that kind of space with it, then you start seeing that happening more in your life as well, where you just, okay, bring it on.
right, right. And I think what I find it helps me with is it propels me into inspired action. It's like when I surrender to what's going on, how I'm feeling, it propels me in a way that if I didn't surrender, I wouldn't be doing that inspired action, whatever that inspired action is. So, we have been through an interesting couple of years. So, what has your practice been like over the past year and a half since we've been in lockdown? What kinds of things have you noticed about your practice?
I've noticed, probably the main thing I've noticed about my practice is that it's evolved more quickly than almost any time I can remember. Like
Mm,
it's changed an awful lot in that time. Um, and that's because my understanding of it has changed an awful lot. So I've always noticed that my understanding keeps changing, and as it does, the way
mhm.
I practice evolves. But there have been some major leaps for myself in that time, and so that's the main thing I've noticed about it.
What does your current practice look like? And it may vary. I know it may not be the same thing every day, but just a glimpse into what your practice is like on a daily basis.
I'm really working into the area of spacious awareness, but with a very different understanding of it than I used to have. So I attended a retreat earlier this year, and this is where the really big jump happened, with a guy called Rodney Smith, who nobody's heard of, but he was one of the earliest teachers up at IMS, which was founded by Jack Cornfield and Sharon Sell.
Yeah.
He was one of the original teachers there, and he's retired now, but he still does the odd retreat and things. And I just happened to come upon this retreat. I had no idea who he was or anything. It was just, I'm going to this retreat, and it just
allowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it blew me away. So my understanding of spacious awareness prior to that was just something to enter into a more spacious experience.
Mm-hmm.
But what I got through that retreat was that more spacious experience, if you allow it and really go into it, is a really clear kind of awareness. It's like connecting with awareness, and you start to really lose your whole sense of self in that.
Wow.
And that is a really powerful experience. So it's not something that I experience every day, but it's something I'm working on. And there's a lot of irony in that statement, because I'm working on is there's so much self in that, so one of the things I actually need to do and need to remind myself to do is not work on it. It's like you just drop in. There's no work. If you're working on it, that's the self coming back in, and the whole point of it is to be able to let that go so it's been fascinating, because what it's done, I've spent, since I started InStill especially, my entire focus has really been on mindfulness. And so the Course in Miracles and Byron Katie stuff and all that, it's still there, but it's in the distance. What this has done is brought all of that back into the fold. So it all makes, like, it all fits together so much more nicely now.
Yeah.
So that.
Well, can you share with people, because my intention with this is to be an ambassador for meditation, right? For people to learn about meditation from different perspectives, people such as you who have, their own programs, and people who just started meditating. So just the wide variety of people that use meditation or mindfulness as a tool. Can you share with people what mindfulness is, what meditation is, what the difference is, and how they are connected, so people can have that understanding and grasp?
Yeah. Okay. So, and I want to qualify, this is what mindfulness is to me. I think you ask anyone and they're going to have a different definition.
Sure.
So for me, the simplest way I like to define mindfulness is noticing with curiosity and without judgment. It's that simple. So a lot of meditations, there is intent to them, like or an expectation in them as well sometimes, of like, I want to get this out of it. I want this to happen, or I'm trying to manifest this, or, all of that sort of. So that's what a lot of different types of meditations entail.
Right.
And then there's the yogic ones, which are very active in a way, like controlling the breath and
Right.
controlling the circumstances and everything. For me, mindfulness practice is it's I guess in many ways it's the simplest form of meditation, because all it is noticing. So it's noticing what's present now, being here for this, and that's all. Like, there's no trying to get this out of it. You don't go into mindfulness meditation with an expectation. It's like, my expectation is it'll be what it is. One of the most one of my favorite quotes from a mindfulness teacher is, right now it's like this.
Because it is.
And that is mindfulness practice in a nutshell. It's like, right now it's like this. And so being with this, that's essentially what mindfulness practice is to me. And the most basic form of it is to follow the breath. And, you can also use a mantra, all those sort of things. And they're all really helpful. And they're, especially as you're starting out, and when I say starting out, maybe the first 10 years.
Exactly.
Having some sort of, and maybe longer, some people, that's all they ever do is just, keep coming back to that. All of that is really helpful, and you never want to lose that ability to return to that. But at some point, you even want to let that go. Yeah. So that you're not putting your attention on anything. Like, attention it comes from the self. It's a deliberate thing that I'm doing. It's a doing. It's a verb. but awareness is a noun. And awareness just is. It's just what exists when all of this drops away. What's left is awareness. And so at some point, we've even got to let the following the breath go. We've even got to let the mantra go. All of that is just, it's all added noise.
Yeah.
But I think when you're moving into that, it may not be mindfulness anymore. We're a secular organization, which means that we don't follow any particular religion or anything like that. We don't align ourselves with any religion or anything like that. And there's an awful lot of Buddhist philosophy in mindfulness, if that's where you want to look. You can look other places too, but there's an awful lot of Buddhist philosophy. And I guess so. And part of one of the things that the Buddha talked about was the Noble Eightfold Path, and the 7th stage of that is mindfulness. The 8th stage is what he calls samadhi, and samadhi is essentially just being one with awareness. So it's kind of like you've got to do the mindfulness thing. But I think, yeah, when you get to a point where it's like you're starting to let that go, that's when you're starting to move more into the just attempting to connect more just with awareness as it is, rather than trying to dictate anything.
Yeah. I think that's a great definition. What right now, it's
Right
like
now,
this.
it's like this. Yeah.
It's the simplicity of it, and it really is, because so often we don't necessarily pay attention because we're on this path to get someplace, right? And so I love nature, and I just love sitting and being in nature. And it's like, and I feel like when I'm doing that, it's like right now, it's like this, and I'm listening to the birds, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how beautiful to be out here and let the birds do what the birds do, and I can just breathe and be here and just relax and pay attention.
Yeah, this whole thing of trying to get somewhere, which is so ingrained in our culture, is it's so antithetical to any sense of peace.
Amen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same. If I'm trying to get somewhere, it means that at some level I'm not happy with where I am.
Yeah.
It means that this isn't good enough. It needs to be different. And where are you going to go? The only place you ever are is here. It's like you can't, there's nowhere you can go. Like you just can't. Physically, sure, it looks like you've gone somewhere, but when you get there, you're here.
Exactly.
It's not going to be any different. And so it's like, until you can come to terms with this right here, right, like right now, there's nowhere to go. Like anywhere you go, it's just going to be the same. And then when you come more to terms with this, there's still nowhere to go. It's
exactly. And sometimes, and even in the simplicity of that, right? It's like we want to make things more complicated than they are. It's just, that's the simplicity of it. Here is all you got right here, right now.
Yeah, let that stuff go.
In this moment, not the moment before, not the moment in front or over to in this moment, and that's why I say it's all practice. That is the practice, because when I can remind myself right now, where are my feet, my hands, where I'm right here, right now, not 2 minutes ago when we were talking about something different, right here, right now is where the power is. That's where the power is, and where we want to live. Let's live in this space of right here, right now. So, this has been a wonderful conversation.
Well, thank you.
So if someone is interested in starting, I want to start mindfulness, I want to start connecting with mindfulness, what would you recommend they do? Where would they go?
Oh, wow.
And feel free to feel free to say InStill Mindfulness. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
So the first thing I would do, and this is for anyone at any level of practice, is invite people to join our online community at instillmindfulness.com. It's free to join. And we have a lot of people that are interested in mindfulness practice, in all different types of mindfulness practice and all different approaches to mindfulness in that community. So I definitely invite people to come join us there. You have access to a whole bunch of guided practices, live guided practices through that that are all free. So yeah, almost everything within the community is also free. So it's free to join, and then it's pretty much anything you want to do in there is free too. So it's great. That would be a good starting point, honestly. That's kind of what it's designed for. But yeah, look, just Insight Timer is great. You're all over Insight Timer, so it's like, start with following your breath. That's the one thing. Like, just start to develop your attention a little. I know I said earlier, like, you got to let the attention go, but first you have to develop it before you can let it.
Yeah, it's like you can break the rules once you know how to do the rules, right?
Well, yeah, kind of. It's like otherwise, what happens is our mind's just totally in control, and that's what you're going to notice when you first start trying to follow your breath. You're going to notice it's very hard to do. Yeah. It's very hard to maintain attention on any one thing. And mind's it's busy. That's what it does. And yeah, I would start there and then start exploring. Everyone's journey into mindfulness is and should be an individual experience.
Exactly.
So yeah, just explore. But yeah, come join us. InStill Mindfulness online community, instillmindfulness.com. It's with the more the merrier. The more the merrier.
And it will be posted in the details, so you can join Jamie and his wonderful group over there. I've been into some of his programs, and he comes and meditates with me at times. And if I have more hours in the day, I would be. It's like we can't clone ourselves. We just have to go. Okay. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to share before we head out?
No, just keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Right here, right now, it's like this. That's about as simple as it gets. And it takes away, I think, the judgment component that is natural, because the mind wants to judge. It's what the mind does, right? The mind wants to judge. So if I can just say right here, right now, it's like this. Okay. That's pretty simple. See, mindfulness is simple, everyone.
It really is. I think that's the thing. It's the simplest idea, but it's very hard to do. Like it's very hard to do well,
consistently well. Yeah.
And that's the challenge. It's like, can I? There's always somewhere else to go on this journey. That's my experience of it.
Yeah.
So start traveling. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with this step, right? So
that's right. That's right. And just step on, join Jamie and his wonderful group of people at InStill Mindfulness. And I thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation about meditation. And the information will be below. If you are someone that is meditating, a teacher or someone who meditates, and you want to have a conversation, please reach out to me. You can reach out to me directly at barbarafaisonllc@gmail.com, or just send me a message on social media. I'm on everything but TikTok. You can just reach out that way. And I would love to have you sit and have a conversation about meditation. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Be well.